so professional. Super professional over here. Not even gonna lie. Such a professional. Hey. Hi, Elaine. I see you there. Whether you're still there or not, I don't know. But I see that you're there. So I'm saying hi. All right. I know, right? So fancy. So fancy. Okay, here we go. Good, good, good. Ooh, look at that. It's noon. I'm in. It's noon. Nice, nice, nice. All right. So here we go. Here we go. We're doing some live office hours here at Voice in the Art of Teaching up here at Voice in the Art of Teaching. And my name is Dr. Shannon Coates, and I develop resources and classes and all that fun stuff for primarily for independent voice teachers, but lots of choral directors, classroom educators, academic teachers, etc. also happen to be happy with the stuff I do. So yay, it's all good. Right, so I am coming to you live from north of Toronto in Canada. And these are the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Mississauga, and the Wendat-Wet'suwet'en peoples. And I wanted to just do a little shout out, and I will also throw this in the comments as well and tag on Instagram. But I also want to do a little shout out for a podcast called Missing and Murdered, Finding Cleo, which is a Canadian podcast. Came out a few years back. I'm just looking here. Looks like maybe 2017 or 2018. So it came out a few years back. Incredible podcast. It's an investigative podcast into what happened to a young Cree girl who was taken from her home in Saskatchewan in the 70s, 60s, 70s scoop. And so if you don't know about the history of 60s scoop, 70s scoop in Canada and America, if you don't know about that, this is something that will open your eyes to that reality and what the reality is and was for many Indigenous people around that time, and the impact of not only residential schools, but the impact of literally being taken from your home and placed in white family, different culture, all that stuff, the impact that has, the lasting impact that has on families, that is made very clear in this podcast. So like I said, I'll put some links up there, just something to consider if you are interested in understanding a little bit more. So there you go. Terrific. So today I want to talk about directives in general, but resonance directives or vocal tract shaping directives in particular. But everything I'm saying today is going to be pretty applicable to resonance directives in general. To directives in general. And a directive is something that we, obviously I'm speaking pretty specifically about what we do in the voice studio, but in general, a directive is something that we say to direct a motion or some kind of change in what the singer who we are working with does. So a directive can be anything from, lift the soft palate to make sure that you're open and buoyant to how much more intense can the sound be. Like those are all directives where we're giving a little bit of it's almost like a feedback, except it's a direct feedback, if you will. So we're telling someone basically information, we're giving them information or something else to do. So I put up a couple of posts this week about directives specifically related to resonance because the Vocal Instrument 101 Live starts tomorrow, and that's one of the modules in the Vocal Instrument 101 is resonance and understanding the anatomy and physiology of resonance, but also how everything coordinates for tonal outcomes, especially along the lines of resonance. So this is a way big topic. Of course, resonance registration, I mean, but we will get into it. Anyway, so that's the reason that I'm talking about resonance this week, is because, I decided to do a little bit of a, deeper dive on social media about resonance, and that's the reason we're talking about it. We're talking about, I think I called this one like resonance directives can be jerks or something like that. I might have even said are jerks because we use resonance directives, and I don't have an issue, obviously, we'll get into it, but and I listed a bunch of the resonance directives that are pretty common, right, that I've heard in voice studios, that are in voice ped textbooks, that we hear, that I use and have used and have had used with me. So I listed a bunch of them. They are lift the cheekbones, open the throat, find forward placement, lift the soft palate, find a yawn space, use nasal resonance, create an inner smile. And some of the other ones that go along with those are things like sing in the mask or bring the sound into the mask. Some of those, those directives that we hear pretty regularly. And these ones, like I said, I drew these ones specifically because they're related to resonance and vocal tract shaping. Those are all they're all the system is not like, you can't just like pull out one thing and be like, that's gonna fix that thing, right? Like, our system is too complex to be like, that's only about resonance. However, these ones are pretty directly related to resonance, even though there's always going to be phonation and there's always going to be anyway. So all of those directives, and I kind of said, and yesterday I posted about perhaps some other ways of approaching resonance and finding coordination for resonance, with some creative, exploratory kind of comments, or I wouldn't call them directives, right? So for me, a directive is do this thing. And then what I would love to see us do in all of our teaching, in all of our directives, is start to move away a little bit from directives and into creative exploration. And so here are some of the reasons that I had, and some of the reasons that I put those specific ones up, those directives up specifically. I had a reason for why I put those ones up. So the first reason is this: embedded in the idea of all of these directives that I posted about, embedded within those directives is an idea about a physiological process. So embedded in the lift the cheekbones directive is the idea that you can lift your cheekbones. And embedded in, let me just make sure, open throat is the idea that you can do something to open your throat, or that there are muscles that engage to open the throat. Embedded in forward placement is the idea that there is a place in our face, specifically at the front of our face, where we can put the sound or place the sound. Embedded in lift the soft palate is the idea that we have absolute control over whether or not the soft palate is raised or lowered, and that there are no other things around that might also be involved. Embedded in that yawn space is the idea that the beginning of that yawn space is 100% achievable, like and that the other things that we're not, that there are other things that it kind of leaves out some of the other things that may be involved in a yawn space. Embedded in nasal resonance is the idea, or asking for nasal resonance is the idea that we're physiologically going to be sending sound waves through the nose, and that there's nothing else involved, and we know that anyway, so, and then the inner smile, kind of embedded in that is, again, that kind of has to do with like the cheekbones and like the way that we're moving physiology. And none of them are wrong per se, right? Like, it's not necessarily wrong. It's just that all of these directives are not physiological realities in the way that we sometimes imply they are when we give them to a student. And so what happens is that when we give, I want to just make sure I stay on track here. Yeah. What these are actually the result of a set of coordinations, and they're all descriptors of what it feels like. So in the mask is a descriptor of what it feels like when I have some narrowing in the vocal tract, and I've got some some of that sound wave kind of moving some of the tissue in my face, and so I feel that kind of vibration in the front of my face. That's a descriptor. In the mask is a descriptor of the outcome of me doing a physiological process. It's not the thing I'm doing. I'm not actually putting sound in the mask. I'm not actually putting sound forward in my face. That's not actually what's happening. What's happening is I feel like that. It's a description of the coordinations that are happening to create a specific tonal outcome. Same with like lift the cheekbones. We physically cannot lift the cheekbones, right? The cheekbones are part of your skull. Like they don't move. Now, some of the muscles around can engage and give the outward appearance of lifting the cheekbones. And what happens, and same with inner smile, what happens is that we have a specific kind of narrowing in the vocal tract, which gives us an intensity in some of the higher areas of the sound wave, which then gives us a brighter tonal outcome. So those things, yes, when we think about lifting the cheekbones, having an inner smile, doing some of these things, when we think about them, we do have a physiological response to that, which gives us a different tonal outcome. But, but those are descriptors of what it feels like to do a thing. They're not actually descriptions of what's actually happening, right? This is not what's physiologically happening. Same with open throat. When we have a sensation of open throat, that means we have released some of our constrictor muscles. It probably means that the larynx is a little lower. Probably means we've got some width around the back of the pharynx. Likely means we've got some things happening at the top back. And that's all good, but open throat is not a thing that we're doing. It's a description of the sensation when we do other things. So all of these directives that we use are descriptions, and of descriptions of sensation, and they're descriptions of what it feels like to have specific kinds of coordinations. Let me make sure I got all of them in here. Yeah, most of them in there. Lift the soft palate, for example. Yes, we do have control over what happens at the soft palate, but very often when we think we're lifting the soft palate, or we think the soft palate is down, very often we're actually widening in through the back of the top of the pharynx, like right behind the throat. We're very often widening back there rather than an actual vertical up and down. So there are other things that are happening there that are not captured by lift the soft palate. But we have a sensation of lifting the soft palate, which is amazing. And so what has happened is we have taken, just like I was talking about last week in terms of chest voice and head voice, right? Those descriptors, chest voice and head voice. What has happened is we have taken descriptors, we've taken things that describe how it feels to coordinate in a specific way to get a specific tonal outcome, and we've turned them into directives. So this is how you do the thing, rather than this is what it feels like when you do a thing. So, and some people are like, Shannon, who cares? Like, why? Who cares? So here are the reasons. I love the idea of exploring versus directives. I think that really helps me thinking about reconciling somatic voice world and voice science world. Yeah, I think so too. And I think that's part of why we've turned some of these things into directives, right? We've turned some of these things into directives because we feel like some pressure from sort of like evidence-based and, voice science, and we feel some pressure to be like really, intentionally like descriptive and very like descriptive in what we're describing descriptive in what we're describing. You're welcome for that beautiful piece of erudite speech. But we feel this pressure, and so we take on some of this, and we assign some of these directives some of these descriptions of sensation. We assign them a little bit. We assign them like a physiological reality that is not actually there. And the reason that this is challenging, the reason that I'm not a huge fan, and the reason that I would love for us to get a little bit more into exploratory creativity and that kind of finding coordination, is because when we are, there are two big issues for me. So two big issues. One is that when I tell a singer to open the throat, or when I am giving a directive to open the throat, I'm asking the singer to concentrate on something internal, so an internal focus, right? I'm asking them to concentrate on something specific internal. And first of all, it's not actually like physiologically accurate. Like there is no muscle that I can engage to open the throat. So the actual physicality of opening the throat is the result of not engaging muscles. It's the result of releasing, in fact. So that physicality, first of all, so it's not there. So I'm asking the singer to focus on doing something internal with my muscles that is also perhaps not even physiologically possible. And what that does as we're learning is it actually means that we don't learn. It's possible that we're not learning as well as we could be, because I am trying to do something focusing this way internally on what the muscles are doing, on what the internal thing is that is happening, the mechanical part. And that isn't necessarily a problem, but it can be a problem, because a more direct way to find that coordination is to use exploration and an external focus on what the result is. So the finding an external, a creative exploratory way, I think I use something like inhale and then sing as if you are inhaling the salt water from the ocean, warm salt water from the ocean. So what does that do? When I think, oh, and then I say, what does that feel like? And the singer says to me, oh, it feels like I really opened everything up. Terrific. So now I've got an external focus to help my body coordinate for open throat sensation. And now I don't have to focus internally on what it means to open my throat. So the difference in the language use is what would happen if you had a sensation of open throat, which allows me to have options and allows me to coordinate in any million of different kinds of ways to find an open throat sensation. And it allows all of the singers I work with to find their own way to coordinate internally for an open throat sensation. And that is different from me saying, open your throat. As soon as I say open your throat, all of the singers I'm working with are now trying, how do I open my, are now trying to tell their muscles to do something. That's not great learning, right? Like that there are instances where we tell the muscles to do something, absolutely. And especially folks who are at the beginning of the learning process, often that can be a useful way to create the directives. However, anytime we can get learners or singers as they're learning to find an external focus and a way to coordinate toward the outcome, that is going to open up possibilities within their bodies for the coordination that works the best for them. It also increases agency, because I'm not telling you how to do the thing. I'm telling you, here's what the outcome is going to be. Or what happens if you inhale and sing as if you are inhaling all of the warm sea air from the ocean? Oh, I inhale all of the warm sea air from the ocean. That feels like open throat. That feels like I've got like a really high soft palate. It feels like I've got like all the space in the world. Terrific. Now I have something external. I'm working toward the outcome rather than trying to figure out how to make the muscles do the thing. Hopefully I'm making sense here. This allows the system to self-coordinate and to find its own efficient patterns. So taking maybe lift the cheekbones. When I'm asking, rather than saying, okay, lift the cheekbones, because now I'm asking the singer to like do something with the muscles, which actually isn't physiologically possible, but whatever. I'm asking the singer to do something with their muscles and to focus on lifting the cheekbones, rather than allowing for exploration in there, which could be something completely unrelated to cheekbones, or you can take that directive and make it into an exploration. What happens if your cheekbones are super high in your face? Or what would it feel like if your cheekbones were super high in your face and you could move them super high in your face? And now let's sing with your cheekbones, pretending that your cheekbones are super high in your face. What would happen? How does that feel to you? What changed for you? That allows the body to figure out the coordination, right? I go like, oh, I'm not telling you to just lift the cheekbones. I'm saying you figure out how to make those cheekbones do this thing. And then then we have an external focus for the thing that we're working toward, which allows the body to do the coordination without me having to tell the body to do all of the little coordinations. One of the differences, that's not in quotes, one of the differences between a pro and an amateur, and when we're looking at motor learning and we're looking at, sport, for example, one of the differences between a pro and an amateur, and one of the reasons they think that pros choke, that pros can, get locked up, is that pros are working toward an external, they're allowing their body to do the coordination because they have an external focus on what's going to happen and what it's going to sound like and what it's going to look like, versus having an internal, okay, so now I have to like move my wrist to this position, and now I have to have my finger on this thing, and I have to, I don't know what sport I was just trying to imitate. Maybe golf. Let's say golf. So now I don't know anything about golf. Let's not use golf. I don't know. But whatever the sport is, rather than thinking, now I have to like have this particular there, and my thumb has to be here, and my eyes have to go here, and I have to do this. Professionals are, the difference between a professional and amateur is an amateur still has to think about all of the little things to get them on that journey, like to get them, that they have to go through all the minutiae, and they're still focusing internally rather than focusing externally. And they think that this is likely, or at least this could be one of the reasons that professionals choke, right? So they lose their external focus, and they somehow get a little bit focused on like, my baby finger isn't like doing what I want it to do, right? Or whatever, right? So that can lead to a choke because we've suddenly gone inside and we're starting to focus on that inside thing. So this is what we're setting up students to do when we give these directives, where we're asking them to focus on the inside thing and to make the inside thing do the thing, or the muscle do the thing, rather than exploring from an external focus. One of the other ones that we have here, forward placement, which is also sort of like in the mask, all of those kinds of ideas, where we're usually with those directives, we're usually looking for a brighter tone quality. That's usually what we're looking for with those directives. And so what we're really looking to do internally is we're looking to, I'm going to way oversimplify this, but we're looking to narrow the vocal tract in some way. We're looking to increase some breath energy usually. There's some other things there. But so when we're working, we're just finding this different kind of vocal tract shaping. And as soon as I say like put the sound in the mask, now what I'm trying to do is, mask is maybe a little bit less, but as soon as I give it as a directive, put the sound in the mask, I'm now going to try to do a thing with my muscles, right? I'm going to focus on a thing internally. But if I say, hey, what would it feel like? Let's explore how you can find sound in the mask. How can you imagine that the sound is going to hit the very center of, like, we all know what it feels like to wear a mask, very center of an external mask. That's a different directive, that's a different way of finding coordination than telling someone to put the sound in the mask or to have forward placement. So yes, it's a little bit semantics, but it's also really important because the way we learn is like how we teach is how they learn, right? And how we learn is how the words come to us. So if we're able to give directives, or if we're able to give exploratory, creative directives that allow the body to find coordination, we also then, oh yay, I'm glad, Regina. We also then take away any implied right or wrong, right? So we take away, if I say to you, put the sound in the mask, and then you don't change to create the tonal outcome I was looking for, they did it wrong. Well, first of all, there's no mask to put the sound into. Secondly, you can't put the sound anywhere. You can't place sound. That's not a thing, right? So if I say to them, put the sound in the mask, or, find forward placement, or get some nasal resonance, or whatever, if I tell them to do the thing, and then they're not able to coordinate the thing, they think that there's a right way and a wrong way to do the thing, and they did it the wrong way. When if I say, hey, what would it feel like to pretend that you have a mask on your face? And let's pretend that all of the sound is gonna like bore a hole through the middle of the mask. What would that feel like? Then we can explore different ways to find that different vocal tract coordination, and the options are there. The singer I'm working with has options, and again, they don't have a right or wrong. It's not just you did it or you didn't do it. It's like, oh, well, let's try a different way now. What other ways do you think we could find that? Or maybe we go to like some of the creative directives that I was using before, or that I put up in the thing, which I don't have here right now. But maybe we go to a creative directive then, right? So maybe we talk about what happens if you have laser eyes. And now saying, what happens if your eyes are actually like gonna like laser right through my forehead? Let's just see what happens. Let's find a coordination by exploring and allowing the body to figure out the coordination for itself, rather than giving them the directive and telling them how to do the thing. What are the other ones here? Nasal resonance, inner smile. Inner smile I love. I know, laser eyes. One of my mentor and colleague and dear friend, Lorna MacDonald, at the University of Toronto, I've seen her use in master classes and in studio classes, I've seen her use pretend you're short-sighted. And you're trying to like see in the distance, and so you're narrowing and for some folks that can be really useful, the idea of like being short-sighted and like I'm trying to really see in the distance, I'm trying to read in the distance. And what does that do? It somehow allows us to coordinate in a different way. It narrows out the vocal tract. It gets us faster breath energy going. It communicates this different vocal tract shaping and a way of coordinating to the body, because I'm like trying to read that sign in the distance. And there we go. And so what does that do? It gives me an external focus of the process, which allows my body to find the coordination, rather than saying, yes, it also removes the necessity of feeling things inside of you, which once you get used to it, you stop feeling, and then you're starting to force to keep the feeling. Yeah, exactly. There is a whole thing of like, we stop like, isn't that cool, James? I know. And again, it brings you out of the like, I need to narrow my vocal tract. I need to like place the sound. I need to, like it takes us out of that and focusing on like what muscles am I moving and how exactly am I changing the vocal tract, and it lets our body do what we are asking it to do. So I'm asking my body to, create more brightness in the tonal quality maybe, or whatever I'm asking my body to do, but I'm not telling it how to do it. I'm giving it this external focus and this external way to explore. And then my body gets to like find the coordination for me. It's amazing. It's amazing. We can trust our bodies. We really can. What was the other thing? Oh yeah, so yawn space, soft palate, lift the soft palate, open throat, some of those things where we're looking for perhaps a more a more lofty tonal outcome. Perhaps we're looking for a little bit more flow. I don't know, whatever we're looking for in terms of vocal tract shaping to get perhaps a warmer, richer sound, a loftier sound. All of those ones, I mean, it's not a bad thing to say like, find the yawn space. That's not a bad thing. That can be very useful. What might be more useful is, let's experiment through yawn space and putting hands to create the space that I'm making inside. Let's experiment through those. And now I'm gonna just have my hands telling my body what to do. So now I'm not saying open the throat. I'm not saying we can trust our bodies. I know. Yes, we don't coordinate movement with thoughts. I know, right, Sarah? We don't. In fact, I didn't pull it up here, but there is also, I mean, when we give directives, there is these kinds of directives where we're saying do the thing in this way. The body has to like figure out what you're saying first. So the brain has to figure out what you're saying first and translate what you're saying, and then try to figure out how to do it in my body. Like, okay, so now I've got to figure out which muscles to tell to do what, right? And that is a longer, less efficient process than when I give you creative imagery or I ask you to explore something where the body says, okay, let's just try to do that thing and see what happens. I'll just coordinate and see what happens, right? The body will do what you ask it to do so long as you don't tell it what to do. Ooh, that might have been a good one, hey? The body will do what you ask it to do so long as you don't tell it what to do? What? That might have been a good thing. I might write that down later. Yes. So, we want to move from an external, we want to move from directives that may not be physiologically possible. We want to move from, let me get my brain back together here. So we want to move out of using a sensation description or a description of what it feels like to do a thing as a directive as to how to do the thing, and into exploring what it feels like to do a thing and creating an external focus so that the body can then coordinate itself toward that external focus rather than trying to do the thing you're telling it to do. So again, it's not that I have anything really against directives, really. What I take issue with is when we turn something that is actually a description of how it feels to do a thing. So it feels like I have an open throat. It feels like I'm singing in the mask. It feels like I placed the sound forward. It feels like I lifted my soft palate. It feels like I had a yawn space. It feels like I had, what are the other ones? It feels like I lifted my cheekbones. It feels like I had an inner smile. All of those things, we want to take all of those descriptions of what it feels like and not make them into directives, because they're not actually how we do the thing, A, and B, it's not a super effective way to learn. It's a much more effective way to learn if I learn from allowing my body to coordinate toward an external focus or an external tonal outcome. Much more effective overall. There are exceptions. There are always exceptions. And there are always times when we will when we'll need to give a really specific directive, like, hey, move your tongue out of the way, or put your tongue farther forward in your mouth. Like, there will be definitely those kinds of things. But then what happens when we start to move toward this external focus is when we ask singers what it feels like, we can then back engineer our directives from what the singer tells us about what it feels like for them, right? So, I mean, the other thing about all of this is that all of these directives are based on someone's sensation of what it feels like to do a thing and not necessarily lining up with your student's sensation of what it feels like to do a thing, right? So like you may say, oh good, you sang with open throat, and they're like, that doesn't feel like open throat to me, right? So we want to ask the singer like, okay, what just happened there? How did that feel to you? And if they say, it felt like my larynx was up in my nose, you can say, amazing, that's not what was happening, but if that's what it felt like, let's go for it. Let's figure it out, right? So it felt like my larynx was up in my nose. Let's keep going. That tonal outcome is what we're looking for. We can talk physiologically about what happened later, but let's learn the thing now. Let's get that coordinated, or let's get that thing coordinated now. So we can back engineer those directives according to specifically to what the student actually feels. It always gives them. Yeah, I always ask my student what it feels like and if they like the sound they just made. Yeah, it's their voice, not mine. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, do I want to get into that right now? Woo! Let's not get into that right now. Maybe, I think not. Let's see, what time's it? Yeah, no, we're not going to get into that right now. Yes. So my final point here that I actually wrote down, because I did actually make some notes today. What do you know? My final point here is that all directives can be made into explorations, and all explorations can be turned into directives. So, and that's positive, both positive and negative, right? So every directive that you give, if you are tempted to give a directive and say, okay, do it this way, or tell your body to do this thing, yeah, sound first, notation later. I agree. If you are tempted to tell a student, again, this is really top-down teaching too, right? Which we want to maybe see if we can move away from, right? If you are tempted to tell a student to do a thing, that's fine. Think to yourself, how can I make this into an exploration rather than a directive? Like, how can I help the student to find their best way of doing this coordination rather than me telling them how to coordinate? So you can change that around. And basically you can turn it into a question. You could say, what would it feel like to blah, blah, blah? How would your body respond if your cheekbones could move up into your eyes? Let's see how the singing changes. If you can move your cheekbones, pretend you can move your cheekbones into your eyes. What would happen? So any directive can be turned into an exploration. And then, yay! And then here's the dark side, right? Any exploration or any response or description of what it feels like can be turned into a directive, which is what we have done. So we have turned open throat, the feeling of open throat, into a directive. You must sing with an open throat. You have to have an open throat. Okay. That's someone's description of what it feels like to have, released laryngeal structure, laryngeal muscles, and to have released constrictors, and to have likely a lowered larynx. Like, that's what somebody's description is of what it feels like. So that isn't necessarily exactly what's happening, right? So yeah, so anything can go both ways. All right, consider, just something to consider. And especially, like I said, when we're talking about, today I'm just talking specifically about resonance directives, but any directive that you give, any directive can be maybe more effective if you turn it into an exploration, right? Any directive of like, have a deeper inhalation, stand up taller, stretch your back out. I love stretch your back out as a directive, but I also, because I feel like it's a little less like stand up straight, but I also know that there can be an exploration of that. What does it feel like for you to take up a lot more space in this room? What does it feel like for your backbone to hit the back wall. Like, how big can your backbone be to hit that, like your spine? What happens if your spine hits the back wall? What happens if the tail of your, the bottom of your backbone, what's it called, spine? What happens if, tailbone, yes. What happens if the bottom actually grows and sinks down into the floor? What does that feel like? Rather than, okay, get grounded, get right into your knees or right into your thighs, get grounded. What happens if your tailbone goes down into the floor like you're a dinosaur? I heard that first from Sarah Whitten, and I've always loved it. What happens if you are a dinosaur and your tailbone is just going right down into the floor? How does that feel? Allows your body to find what works for you. Allows the student to find what works for them without you imposing what works for you. It's a great day to be teaching this way. It's a great day to be teaching this way. There are definitely some arguments against this, not against. There are some folks out there who know a lot about learning and about motor learning who might say, something weird going on over here on Facebook, but who might say that this kind of student-led learning, this kind of like student-led learning and exploration is, no one will ever learn anything this way. Like there are folks who say that, like especially in an academic institution where I need to really direct the lesson and I need to really make sure that they get to where they're going. There are some folks who would say that. I have some answers to that, and I think that that's not entirely true, but today is not the day to get into that. Maybe I'll talk about that another day. All right, there we go. Talked long enough. Today is almost the weekend. Have a terrific weekend. I'm going to be in a Zoom room talking to half a dozen people, half a dozen voice teachers and coaches about how the vocal instrument works. So we're going to get some real like anatomy and physiology going, and then on Saturday especially, and then on Sunday we're going to talk about putting it all together. Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you. I'm so glad. Yay! Oh, good. I'm so glad. Oh yeah. I'll say one other thing. One of the external focus things, you're so welcome, that I love and that I've been using for a long time now, it's like one of my absolute favorites, is the idea of the corners of the jaw being in love with the collarbone. Oh, you're so welcome, Sarah. Being in love with the collarbone. So if you try that and you think to yourself, the corners of my jaw are trying to kiss my collarbone, what does that do? It gives you the space between the molars that we're often looking for, right? It helps with open throat. It gives me like a whole open throat sensation. It gives me all of these interesting changes, and then I can and that's an external focus, right? I'm not telling them to open the space at the back of their mouth. I'm not telling singers to find that space between the molars. I'm not telling them to do any of that. I'm saying externally focus on the corners of the jawbone or want to kiss your collarbone. And now, what does that do to the inside of your face? How does that change your resonance? It's amazing. I love it. So stuff like that. If you can find stuff like that, creative explorations in that way, that may be a more effective way to get the learning in. Take good care. All right. Have a terrific weekend. I will say goodbye over here on Instagram. There we go. Boop, boop, boom. And take care, Facebook friends.